Imagine this. For nearly 50 years, the Soviet Union had a secret, a huge secret. We're talking about an entire city, a city with over 100,000 people, with schools, theaters, everything, and a terrifying purpose. A city that was completely, totally erased from every single map on Earth.
So that's the big question, right? How in the world do you make an entire city and all the people in it just vanish? Well, the answer pulls back the curtain on this hidden world of secrecy, strange privilege, and ultimately a nuclear disaster that was covered up for decades.
Okay, so our story starts deep in the Ural Mountains. This is where the USSR built something so secret it didn't even have a proper name. Locals just had this ominous nickname for it, Atomgrad, the atomic city. And it was exactly what it sounds like, a place surrounded by miles of barbed wire and armed guards.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about some tiny military base here. This was a full-on city. But if you tried to find it on a map in the 50s, the 60s, even the 80s, you'd see nothing. Just an empty patch of forest. To the entire outside world and even to most Soviet citizens, this place just didn't exist.
Life inside was, well, a total paradox. On one hand, you had all the normal things, stores, schools, movie theaters, but the rules were absolute. Nobody could get in without special clearance. And once you were in, you couldn't just leave. But the biggest rule, the #1 rule, was silence. If you talked about where you lived or what you did, you could end up in prison, or worse.
Now, here's where the story gets really wild. You'd think a place this restrictive, this dangerous, would be like a prison, right? You'd think people would be desperate to get out. But nope, it was the exact opposite. People were desperate to get in. Why? Because inside that fence, life was a Soviet dream.
You really have to understand this contrast. I mean, for most people in the Soviet Union, life was about scarcity. You had to wait in hours-long lines just for bread. You lived in crowded, shared apartments. But inside Atomgrad, it was a world of privilege. The stores were always full. Families got their own modern private homes. And if you're a top scientist, you got huge bonuses, new cars, even vacation homes. It was this little bubble of prosperity in a country defined by hardship.
Which, of course, brings us to the obvious question. A paradise built in secret, surrounded by barbed wire and soldiers? Yeah, there had to be a catch. And the price for living in this secret paradise was incredibly, dangerously high.
So where did this place even come from? Well, you have to rewind to the end of World War II. The moment the US dropped the atomic bomb, Stalin was panicked. He gave a simple, urgent order: build me a city and build me a bomb. So a secret army of the country's best scientists, engineers, along with thousands of prison laborers, was shipped out to the mountains. And by 1948, they'd built Chelyabinsk 40, a city with a number, not a name.
So, what was this city actually doing? What was the big secret? It had a single, terrifying purpose: to manufacture weapons-grade plutonium. That's the key ingredient for the Soviet Union's first nuclear bombs.
And let's just be really clear about what plutonium is. This isn't some minor chemical. It's one of the most toxic, most dangerous substances on the planet. It is literally the highly unstable radioactive heart of a nuclear weapon. And making it is an unbelievably risky business. Inside the city's secret nuclear factory, the Mayak complex, safety was, well, it was basically an afterthought. Workers were handling intensely radioactive materials with not much more than rubber gloves. Radiation leaks were just a normal part of the day. And when workers complained about their health, hair falling out, skin burns, constant exhaustion, the state-run doctors would just dismiss it as flu-like symptoms. Pretty soon, the whole city started seeing these really strange patterns. People were getting skin burns just from being outside. Their teeth and hair started falling out. And maybe most disturbing of all, kids were being born with all kinds of mysterious, severe illnesses. But if you ask the authorities, officially, everything was perfectly fine.
So you have this slow-motion disaster of daily radiation exposure, which was already terrible. But then came the day of the big one, the single event that the Soviet Union would try to completely erase from history. The date was September 29, 1957. Deep inside the Mayak complex, there was a massive tank holding 80 tons of highly radioactive liquid waste. And on that day, its cooling system failed. The explosion was enormous. It wasn't a nuclear bomb, but a chemical one that blasted a huge radioactive cloud into the atmosphere, contaminating thousands of square kilometers.
We now know it as the Keistim disaster. And it is, to this day, the third worst nuclear accident in human history, right after Chernobyl and Fukushima. The crazy part, for decades, the rest of the world had absolutely no idea it had even happened.
And the cover-up that followed was just audacious. The government acted like nothing happened. They evacuated entire villages in the middle of the night, telling residents it was for some temporary construction project. Then, and this part is just unbelievable, they declared the most contaminated land a nature reserve, just to have an excuse to keep people out. The real truth didn't come out until 1989, more than 30 years later.
And it wasn't just the explosion. For years, the Mayak plant had been dumping its nuclear waste directly into the Techa River. Thousands of people downstream use that water every single day, for drinking, for bathing, for their crops. A Soviet doctor who later studied the horrific health effects called it exactly what it was: a long, undocumented radiation experiment on human beings.
So, what happened when the Soviet Union finally collapsed? Did the fences come down? Did the city finally open up to the rest of the world? The answer is, not really. To keep up the secrecy, they kept changing its name, like a spy changing aliases. Chelyabinsk 40 became Chelyabinsk 65. After the Soviet Union fell, it was finally given a real, actual name, Ozersk. But a new name didn't mean a new identity. And when you look at the city then versus now, it's pretty shocking how little has actually changed. It went from being top secret to being officially closed. The armed guards and the fences, they're still there. It's still a wealthy city funded by the state, and its main purpose is still producing nuclear materials.
Think about that for a second. We're talking about today, right now. There is still a city in Russia locked down with Cold War-era security. You can't just drive into Ozersk. You need a special permit to get past the checkpoints. It's a relic of a secret past that never really went away.
And the legacy of all this secrecy is just devastating. Thousands of the original workers and their kids suffered from cancers and all sorts of illnesses. Entire villages along that poisoned river were abandoned, and they're now just radioactive ghost towns. And today, the people who still live in Ozersk are divided. Some see what their parents did as a noble, patriotic sacrifice. Others see it as a profound betrayal by the very government they were serving. All of this leaves you with one final, kind of chilling thought. The story of Ozersk isn't just about one secret city. It's a powerful reminder that when a government goes to such extreme lengths to hide a place from its own people, the city itself isn't the real secret. The real secret is always what was happening inside.